Welcome to Free Pilot Training. I'm Josh, and this is my friend Wade Vaughn. And today I'm going to get asked some personal questions. So I hope you guys enjoy this video.
Hey, thanks for having me here and spending
Yeah.
some time with you in your airspace here today, which was a little bit of a change up, but enjoying our time together. So first of all, just to kind of get the stage set, what's the Free Pilot Training? How does that all start, and where's that going?
Free Pilot Training kind of started as an interesting thing. I have some other YouTube channels. I don't know if you know that, but I started out doing some other things, and I just love YouTube. But I was right in the middle of C-130 training. Well, I had just finished C-130 training. I was in the middle of seasoning. I was like, you know what, I'm going to get my CFI. I'm going to teach my father-in-law and get him his private pilot certificate, and then we can just go fly and just have fun. And that turned into lessons for other people. And what ended up happening is I told people, I was like, my students, I said, I'll tell you what, let's do. I want you to watch some ground courses on YouTube, and then I want you to come back to me, and then I'll go through and make sure you have the knowledge to take the written exam. And when you're ready to go, I'll endorse you for the written exam. And they came back to me and they said, well, there's no ground courses on YouTube. And I thought, what the heck? So you know what? I created Free Pilot Training. I started making videos, and people started watching them. And pretty soon, I'm well on my way to having a complete ground course. And now I do have a complete ground course. So it was one of those things, like, it was kind of sort of an accident, but it was a welcome accident. So
Well, and it's been very productive for all of us, I know, speaking for myself and many others, of what you've done. How do you find a balance between, because that's taken probably a good bit of time in your day job, between the Free Pilot Training, you mentioned the other some other podcast stuff you're doing, and family. How do you balance all this?
it's not easy. So it's kind of interesting. I started out as a C-130 pilot, and so I was really, really busy in the beginning there trying to learn that plane. And over time, Free Pilot Training was just a real small part of my life, and I was just doing it as I had time. And when things started growing, I realized that there's a little bit of money to be made there, and people are searching for this content. And so I started producing more and more and more. And now I'm actually up here in Alaska, not flying, but Free Pilot Training has grown so much that I'm struggling to balance both of them, to be honest. Balancing a full-time military job, Free Pilot Training, and actually family too. And so I'm hoping that pretty soon I can go back to flying the C-130 and maybe have a lot more time for content creation. So,
Well, you're staying really busy. Anybody that's watching your stuff knows it takes a lot of time to do that.
Does.
And with that, kind of that balance of family and work and the Free Pilot Training, how do you keep your energy up with all of that? I mean, it's a lot of energy drinks, or what keeps you going?
I think really just the passion for general aviation, because when you like doing something, it's not like work. And editing is a lot of work, but when you go fly an airplane, it just refreshes you and gives you a taste of, this is what we're working for. It's just awesome, and I love sharing that with people. And I think when you share it, it just revitalizes you even more and allows you to...
Well, it's clear that you enjoy it, because you welcomed me into your circle of trust, actually. I feel like not only do I feel I've known you before we've even met personally, watching on there, but you invited me in and been very helpful in working to allow me to bring this content to others.
Yeah, and so it's kind of funny, and this is the whole reason why I brought Wade in on this video, is because we're making another video on his channel, because he reached out to me and said, hey, I'm wanting to create some content, and I want to get your thoughts on it, and here's what I'm going to do. And I'll let you kind of share more here in just a second. But I get a lot of people that reach out to me, and when I heard what your mission is, I really liked the idea, because, well, for one thing, Free Pilot Training, it's training content. And I've made a couple videos that aren't really training, but I really want to keep it as training. And so I don't really go off onto tangents too often. Like this particular video is kind of special because I want to share other aviators and other channels with you guys. So I think this is important, but free pilot training is for training. And so I wanted to bring somebody else in that can show like a side of me that you guys don't necessarily get to see. So tell me a little bit about your mission and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, it started, I wanted to improve my skill set in aviation, and I was working on additional ratings, and I realized that what a better place to get all the training, free training, was right on YouTube. And I went to YouTube for everything. I'd read about it, or I'd do something on my ground school course, and I'd then go. And when I specifically over the last year or so, when I was working on my IFR rating, and I'd go in and I'd watch your stuff, and I just realized that, man, it started to hit me that the time that people put in, give freely. Now, clearly, as you mentioned, some of this starts off as a place where it's just a hobby, or you're filling a gap because you're filling a gap for someone you're trying to help. And then before you know it, it grows and it grows and it grows. In your case, it's significantly grown. But I realized nobody who's out there talking about Josh's behind the scene.
Yeah.
And nobody was doing that. And so I was asking around a little bit, and I started playing with an idea in my head, and I said, what if people would be interested if I was to reach out and talk to people that are spending their time to help us to hear what their backstory is? What's the story behind what we see on screen with the training? And I dreamed up this old fly guy, and I guess I fit that. So it works. People say, how do you get away with that? Well, I can talk about myself. I'm not talking about anybody else. But that's really how it started. It was a desire to give credit where credit was due for those who are going the extra mile.
And I've already watched quite a few of your videos, and I think it's cool because one of the things about the aviation community is just because I have 200,000 subscribers, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm known in certain communities. In fact, when I first came up here, there's not really a lot of people that knew who I was. And I don't know why that is, but there are certain people in the aviation community that are really well known. For example, Seth Lake, but he doesn't really have that many followers on social media, and it's kind of interesting how the aviation community is centered, and there are so many people like that that contribute to training, to education, to making aviation better. And that's a cool part of what you do, is you're able to tell those stories that like people from the outside looking in can't necessarily see because they're not quite a part of the community yet. And this is what's cool about free pilot training, is there's a lot of new folks coming into aviation on the channel, but there's also a lot of old folks. And actually, I say old, but a significant part of my viewers are people in their 60s. I'd say a quarter of them are people over 55.
They're young people then.
Yeah, they're young people. But what I mean is that there's people from the outside looking in, and they want to be a part of this community, and they don't see, like, you and I, we're inside the aviation community, and we see like how awesome it is, but these people don't know that. And so I love that you're sharing that with other people.
That was a big part of my mission too, is to try to introduce others into a community that they're just not aware of and what they can engage in.
And so I think the aviation community could handle more people like that, and people who are willing to contribute, and people who are willing to be a part. So I like what you're doing.
And I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I knew my strength wasn't going to be the trainer. And technically as capable as you and others, I wanted to take on something that I felt comfortable with, I could relate to, and bring some, again, credit where credit's due.
So tell me a little bit about who you've interviewed so far and some of the people you're going to be interviewing.
Wow. You mentioned Seth as a great example. I've got, again, I get a little bit overwhelmed when you have 200,000 subscribers and where I'm at. But Seth Lake was one of the folks, and a good friend of yours, and Seth was the second or third that I actually interviewed, and he just was wonderful to talk to. Again, very sincere, very dedicated to the aviation business. And then the one thing I did find is that as I talked to people, when I started, I didn't know how I was going to go about this to get in front of people. Mm-hmm. I found out that the way to do it started to become clear to me is find someone who knows someone. And so I've had the opportunity to talk with Ed Allen, who was the commander of the Coral Sea. Again, he was a military aviator, you know, and his story was completely different than others, you know, and everyone's story. The one thing I have found is that everything is founded on this thing called aviation, but how you get there is
different for everybody.
Is different from everybody, and so I'm also, you know, we mentioned Brian Schiff. He's another well-known fellow that's out there that's a very vast aviation background in his family, and he's there for, you know, he's promoting. What I loved about what his message was the safety message and how he is making sure. So once again, common platform. How we started, you know, everybody starts in a little different spot. But what I think is very interesting about the mission that I'm trying to accomplish here is I don't think aviation, there's going to be aviation in each story, and that's what I want, but how it gets around is just changes. And
well, in the video, I mean, we just did the video for your channel about me, and one of the things I like to tell people is I'd never even been in an airplane before I turned 20, and the first time I was in an airplane was in a commercial airliner going to basic training. And so it was one of those things, like, I knew I wanted to fly, but it was just one of those things that was just not achievable for me. So, and
again, you were mentioning when we spent some time on the other side of the coin, and that was fascinating to me. And we won't spill the beans on that one here, because it's a great part of your story, and I think people will be really fascinated to hear that.
All right, so I wrote down this question, and it's kind of a complicated one, so we'll see how well you do. It says, tell me one thing about aviation that you think everyone else should know that not many people do.
I would say that the thing that strikes me about that is that the strength of the aviation community. I go back to the family of aviation. I have found in a very short period of time, I've been working on my project, you know, since the first of the year in earnest. Those that are in it know it.
Yeah.
Those that are not in it probably would not understand relationships, how people count on one another, how they're willing to give. What I find interesting too is even the way they want to train.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always someone that wants to try to help you. People, they find an exception, I'm sure, but they're not there to beat you down on it. So I think it's the family of aviation and the strength that comes along with it, and the relationships are very deep. And I think that's something that I didn't realize, and I know that for a fact because I'm seeing it now every conversation I have.
Yep.
It's a very common theme.
And it's worth sharing because there's so many people. And actually, I've watched some of your videos. When I watch those videos, I'm like, I really want to meet that person. I really want to meet that person. And then it's one of those things like, I could probably meet those people. But it's cool because those people are kind of the head of their community in that area. And they're so tied in. They're so tied in. And like I said on our other video, and I won't go into details, but everywhere I go, everyone knows Seth Lake, and it just cracks me up because I'll be up here in Alaska and they're like, "You know Seth Lake?" "Yes, I do." "And how do you know him?"
When Seth watches this, he'll say, "Hey, it's true." But
it's true. I just never seen anything like that. But you don't know who I am, but you know who Seth is.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of one-upmanship there, but it is. I think that's really what I'm learning. I would also take away the things I've learned. One of the other things I've learned is from Nick Adcock, who's one of Seth's friends down there, and we did an interview too, and he was a wonderful person to talk to. Had a great journey, had some personal struggles, and he overcame them in a wonderful way, and I'm so happy to meet him. But what he left me with is enjoy every flight. And every time you get up there, enjoy it in some fashion, because you don't know when the last one will be. And I think there's just another lesson. I find myself being rewarded more personally for these things than anyone else on what I learned.
And that's a really good point, because I love I love the success stories that your channel kind of tells, because for those of you who don't know, aviation is not cheap to get into. And like for me, I got my private pilot certificate and then I couldn't afford to fly for a long time. But these people that you're interviewing, they got in and they scratched and clawed, and they were passionate about it, and they wanted this, and then they crawled their way into an aviation job, whether it be photography or flying for the airlines or military aviators. There's so many ways that you can claw your way into the aviation community, and the opportunities are endless. And so, but they're success stories. I love hearing that.
And most of them have a story around they had a dream and they had to work somehow to get there. No one really gave it to them. I just go back where I find where my future lies is it's the relationships like we're building here and someone else. And it doesn't, when I first started, I thought, well, maybe I just have to talk to all the people that are on front and center. But the reality is, those are wonderful stories, and there's so many other stories out there. And that I have had several people tell me at the end of our, what I call conversations. I don't like to call them interviews because I think we're having a conversation here about your life. And they'll say something like, Wade, we had a great conversation here, and I've talked about things I haven't talked about in 20 years. Mm-hmm. And they just are so sincere that it kind of stirs up all of these things that got them to where they are that sometimes they forgot. And there is no better feeling than when someone tells you that made their day in that conversation. And to me, it's that one step at a time that keeps me going.
Yeah, and I shared quite a few things in the video with you that you really only people that care about aviation are ones that would want to hear that. And so you don't get to tell people your story too often. And I've been so busy on free pilot training that I can't tell that story on free pilot training. And so I think it's pretty cool what you're doing to give people an opportunity to talk about those things. So I really appreciate you taking the time to make this video with me. And if you guys like this, you should try this video right here. Hopefully it's right underneath this finger right here. But this is a video over on Wade's channel. It's called the Old Fly Guys Network Podcast. And hopefully you'll get some details on my life and some of the other aviation guys in the aviation community. And I appreciate you guys watching this video. Check this out right here.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll see you later.
All right, very good.
See ya.